and Larry Show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ike and Larry Show. This is episode number, 4. It's February 1st. February 1st, can you believe it? Groundhog Day is tomorrow, isn't it?
I still can't believe it's 2024. The years are starting to really jet past us.
I'm just super excited. It's February and it's going to get warmer again.
Yeah.
So thanks for tuning back in. Like I said, episode 4. We had some good results on the first episode. It's still growing by 1 and 2 every day. So you all have to like and subscribe or say something. You're starting to piss me off if you don't start saying something. If there's 110 people who watched episode 1, if there's 110 people that watched episode 1, and most of them watched it almost all the way through, which is pretty good retention, but they can't say a damn thing about it, what is wrong with you? You know, you're embarrassed? Are you scared to be associated with us? Just give it a thumbs up, you big pussy.
All
right.
Let me translate what my comrade here just said. He's asking you please to comment on the show and watch the show and comment on it and tell us what you think, because we really, really appreciate you checking us out. And that's the translation of what he said.
That's very, very elegant, very, very beautifully said. Now, you heard what I said. That's for you white trashers out there who don't understand what Larry said. This is what I said. Subscribe, like, say something, big pussies.
Okay. Good cop, bad cop. Now you're getting a great example of it.
I'm the good cop, apparently. Larry's a bad cop. See, you can tell by his eyes he's a bad cop. I'll play the good cop. Anyhow, what's new in the news?
You look like Anton LaVey, by the way, right now. A little darken this up. You don't know who Anton LaVey is?
I know who Adam Levine is.
Anton LaVey, the creator of the Church of Satan, wrote the Satanic Bible, which was all in vogue in the 60s, creating the satanic cults in California, or the satanic churches. You don't remember him at all?
I've probably heard of him.
Yeah,
I was never part of that organization, so no, probably not. I've seen a bunch of satanic altars and sacrifices or sacrificial areas and stuff like that as a cop, but yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, no worries. So you say you have some news?
I do. It's just something kind of interesting today. We get talking about ghosts and why people see certain things and why people don't. I think we actually may have mentioned this in the first show. Why do folks actually? Some folks see a ghost, some people don't. Some people experience something, some people don't. And there was an article written by Dr. Frank McAndrews and appeared in Psychology Today. And his basic theory was individuals' cognitive style can determine how susceptible they are to experiencing paranormal activity. Now, what is cognitive style? Now, working in the college and teaching for a number of years, I'm familiar with learning styles. Many of us are. Cognitive style has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with how you perceive something. In this particular case, an intuitive approach as compared to an analytical approach could make you more susceptible or not to experiencing paranormal activity. Intuitive meaning looking for other answers. Analytical, probably numbers, hard numbers, A, B, and C. Now, we being cops, we've got to be a little bit of both. Would you agree?
Yeah, I certainly do.
But certainly we've got to be intuitive, and I think that's why a lot of cops do experience paranormal events, because we are intuitive. We're looking for different ways to solve the problem or looking for different answers. We can't have it too close to the mind. But Dr. McAndrews is saying if you have an intuitive approach, cognitive style on your approach to learning what's going on around you in the world, you're probably more susceptible to experiencing the paranormal than if you're more analytical, a bean counter, basically, very black and white. So I just thought that was interesting, and that's the type of thing I think that we got to start looking at to kind of figure out why things occur, because that's a question I get all the time. How come you saw something and I didn't? Or how come my brother-in-law saw something but I didn't? How come I saw something but my brother-in-law didn't? And we were both in the same room. So
In layman's terms, I would compare it to as some people are more spiritual. They're more in tune with nature and their surroundings, like cops.
Intuitive. Yeah. Mhm.
Some people are narcissistic psychopaths. They're so concerned about their own egos and about their own "what about me?" They don't have time to see ghosts or anything else unless it benefits them. That's kinda how I put it.
Oh, okay. But I do think there's a third, the analytical side. If you are and I don't want to pick on accountants, but I'm just going to use that because accountants deal with hard numbers. Everything is number, or mathematician. That's how you solve your answers, is by that definitive mathematical equation. And there's
Right.
no analyzing there. There's no intuition there. It's black and white numbers. So I don't think that's really as much ego driven or egocentric as much as it
No,
is
you're
just the way you look at things.
some people need to see proof. They need to have it in front of them in black and white in order to
Mm.
identify it. But doesn't mean it's not there. It's just they are not capable of reaching out and seeing that. They're too busy in their own
Well, that
analytic
goes back,
way.
yeah, and that goes back to what we've talked about dozens and dozens of times. There's just people look at things differently, and our minds work differently. Now, here's a question. I don't know, and I didn't see this in the article, but I only went through a few parts of it. Is there something in the brain that creates this that maybe blocks the ability to see something? If you're very analytical, maybe there's something in your wiring that just won't let you see it.
That's could totally be because your brain
Yeah.
is a messed up thing. I mean, it can create and block, and who knows? I've seen things,
Mhm.
back in my younger days when I was driving trucks. I've had some pretty good daytime awake hallucinations where the subconscious just kind of takes over from pure exhaustion and
Mhm.
no drugs or anything like that involved. It's just you get so exhausted. I've remember I've driven probably 80 miles one time and couldn't remember how I did it in the middle of the day. I didn't snap out of it
Oh,
until my exit came up. And I'm like, holy crap! I've covered an hour and a half's worth of driving. I must have been sound asleep. Apparently,
some
I
may
didn't
call
hit
that a
anybody or
time
run
slip.
somebody over. That's
Some may call
subconscious.
it a time slip. Yeah.
Yeah. So who knows what your brain can kind of artifacts it can create, and
Mhm.
yeah, who knows? But when more than one person sees it, then it's not an artifact from your brain unless your brain's in tune with the person next to you's brain and they're conspiring for you to hear this sound or see this thing. So that eliminates all of that.
Well, and there's also that issue of frequency and vibration. Everybody's vibration is a little bit different. Nobody's the same. So maybe that's part of it. See, those are the things we got to study. Those are the things we got
Mhm.
to try and start figuring out if we're ever going to figure out the answers to all this.
So I found one news story, and it's a little more lighthearted because I'm a lighthearted guy. But it says a customer has filed a negligent lawsuit against Dunkin' Donuts, claiming he was injured by an exploding toilet at one of the coffee chains in Central Florida. And that's what caught my eye. I'm like, oh, of course it's Florida.
Florida, Florida, yes.
Paul, whatever his last name is seeking more than $100,000 in a lawsuit filed Wednesday in a state court in Orlando, claiming he suffered severe and long-term injuries following the explosion of a toilet in the men's room of a Dunkin' Donuts location in Winter Park, Florida.
Winter
After the
Park,
explosion,
okay.
after the explosion, Paul was covered in human feces, urine, and debris. He walked out of the men's room seeking help from workers, and the store manager, according to the lawsuit, asked the store manager for help, and the store manager just kind of chucked it off and laughed and says, "This happened before."
It's happened
stay out,
before.
yeah. So stay out of Dunkin' Donuts anywhere in Florida, Larry. I'm just sound advice right there, brought to you by Ike. It's not a good thing.
Yeah. Well, there's been some times that had to use restrooms and been told never to come back. So,
I've never
just
seen one
eh,
explode.
no, never. Now, did it explode as in pieces come apart, or just
Covered in human feces and urine. That's not to get off the topic of human feces and debris here, but when I was a lieutenant in the corrections department, I was in my office one day and we had a female corrections officer, and she was real short. She was like 5'2" and probably that big around too. But she thought she would survive any kind of major incident in the prison by just flirting with every inmate that was there. And as you know, a lot of men in prison have this hatred for women. That there's, a lot of them are in prison because of women. So
Mhm.
it's not, flirting doesn't always work. So I'm sitting in my office one day and I'm doing my usual, paperwork and stuff. She comes walking in and she's dripping from head to toe with human feces. This guy, he was a lockdown inmate, so meaning he was in a cell 23 hours a day, got fed through a food port and little, square slot in the door and stuff. Well, he's been saving his milk cartons and defecating in them for a week or so, stockpiling them and waiting for the right opportunity for when she showed up. And she opens up the food slot and she's flirting with him as usual. And you get closer, and he just dumped it all on her. And she's standing in my office just dripping crap. And I'm like, get the hell out of my office, find the nearest shower, and jump in. And then we ended up sending her to the hospital because hepatitis and all kinds of
Oh,
weird
yeah.
stuff that could you have, So I'm like, yeah, that's covered in crap for sure. Just a quick little tidbit in case you were
Thank you for
wondering.
sharing. Thank you for sharing that. That's okay.
I don't know if Florida inmates do that, but it
Oh,
wasn't unusual.
I got my start in the Dade County Jail, and that was a favorite one, but it was never fecal matter. It was always urine. Every
Yeah.
year they toss a cup of urine at us. And,
Did you ever have one strip down and cover himself in his own feces and then lube himself
well,
up?
no, no, never had that one. Had some interesting ones, but never had that one.
On the SORT team, we'd have to go extract these guys. Stupid things we did when we were young. Now if I had to do it, I'm like, I ain't touching this guy. Screw it, leave him in there. But back then, you put on all your black stuff and your helmet and your pads and your shock shields and everything, and you're just badass. And you rip that door open, and a 7-man team goes in there and wrestles this guy down and brings him out and decontaminates him. I'm like, how in the heck we never got any kind of diseases is beyond me.
I sometimes wonder how we survived the profession for all the years we did it
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
But that's a story for maybe another show.
Yep. Anyway, today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about demons. Demons, ghosts, bad spirits, any of that weird crap that so many people don't want to get involved in ghost hunting. At least that's what I've experienced. Because they're afraid of the dark side. They equate ghost hunting to the other side, a realm that we should have nothing to do with because of demons. And demons will come and attach themselves to you and make you do really, really bad things.
On the flip side, you get other folks that everything's a demon, and
Yes,
they go looking for them,
yes.
as if it's a game. So, what do you think? Do demons exist, Ike?
I do, but not in the way that most people think of. I don't think a demon is a religious artifact or a fallen angel
Okay.
or something that was cast out. I think a demon was never a human to begin with. It's not a human soul. I think it's something else altogether. And it may be nefarious, it may not be. Who knows? But I think there are entities out there that are non-human, as we've all seen or heard of, like
Mhm.
skinwalkers. That's probably never been a human. Well, they say skinwalkers were humans, but there are entities out there that don't look human-like, and they were never humans.
And elemental entities, and you hear a lot about them from
Yeah,
Ireland and Scotland, the sprites, gnomes, things like that. And not so much gnomes, but sprites and fairies were never human to begin with. Wood spirits, tree spirits, things like that. So that's been in the folklore of mankind since the beginning.
yeah, the
But
Germans have their folklore of the little dwarfs, the gnomes. They call them Zwerge. Same kind of deal, though. They were never humans. But demons. Now? Have you ever experienced an entity or something while you were out investigating that just had a bad feeling about it, like it wasn't right, or it was out to harm you, or something like that?
well, and I think I might have mentioned this in our very first episode. The answer is yes. I've had two incidences myself. I think I mentioned one the first show when we were in the old school in Fellsmere, and something went through me, and I was actually passing out. And my son caught me as I was going down, and we were using PS. What was it? I can't remember the DR50. I can't remember. It's a Panasonic recorder that became quite the vogue in the paranormal field,
Very
which just
expensive.
seemed, yeah, very expensive, and it was built in the 90s, and I don't particularly like it because you cannot transfer the data anywhere. You've
Hmm.
got the only way you can transfer the data is to hold it up to a recorder, which you lose quite a bit. But anyway, we were using this, and I felt something come through me, and my head began to spin, and I was going to the ground. My son Evan caught me, and right after we did that, the gentleman we were with said, "Was that you?" And the response came clear. Believe it or not, it came right across this recorder saying, "Yeah, and you're next, bitch." We had a woman that was with us, and he had been talking that whatever this was had been saying stuff over the recorder most of the night, derogatory towards the folks that we were with, and who will go nameless. And yeah, so that was one. And then I had another one. We were up in actually it was Winter Haven, Winter Park, Winter Haven. I think it was Winter Park. We were up. It's near Orlando,
Wherever the
and
toilets explode.
wherever, yeah. And we were in a train station, and I suddenly got a real hair up my ass. I mean, I really did. I was grumpy. My attitude changed.
How could other people tell?
Anyway, but it was and I could feel it, and there wasn't anything I could do about it. Now, we found a large electrical panel on the wall that was exposed, and I said, that's got to be what's making me feel bad. So we took the EMF detectors to think if we were in a fear cage, we were getting pounded by EMFs that was causing stuff like that, and there was absolutely nothing coming out of it. So, once I got out of that room, I felt normal again. My son, Brian, my oldest boy, had the same thing happen. We were in an old building in Fort Pierce, a place called the Boston House, known to be haunted for years and years. It's not haunted by the entity people think it is, but that's another story. And my son, he was probably 15 at the time, maybe 14, he just started really investigating with me. And he's a very stoic individual, very, very serious, no nonsense kind of guy. We're in the upstairs in this room, and suddenly he sighs and he goes, late at night, and he goes, "Dad, I love this room. I think this room makes me feel so good. I never want to leave it." I picked his ass up and took him outside, and he got back to normal. So those are some examples that I've had of something messing with us.
Right, right. Now, that doesn't make it demonic, though. It could just be an angry asshole of a spirit, I'm sure there's got to be asshole spirits out there. People that died and aren't happy.
Well, if you talk to some mediums, Chris being one of them, if you're a jackass here on Earth, you're going to be on the other side. In that,
dude, what about if you're mentally ill? Like if you're severely handicapped mentally, what happens to you? Are you a mentally handicapped spirit, or does everything fix itself?
Well, but now you get into the argument is what happens after we die. Are we just here to learn something and go through a cycle? Then we go back and, come back later on. That kind of flies in the face of that argument. But the other one is, sometimes you leave here and you get stuck. You don't go back to the hive mind or whatever you want to call it. And maybe you do retain that complete personality. And we've seen that a lot where people have retained their personalities they had here on the other side. We've experienced that. So maybe for some reason they go over, their return to wherever they're supposed to go is delayed, or they can't get back, and they keep the same personality they had here. And that's scary when you think about something like a serial killer, that happening to a serial killer.
Yeah. Hitler.
I was just
Stalin.
Yeah, those names. Hitler named, as I said, that was coming into my brain. Yeah, and is that what some people would call a demon, do you think?
And a demon most likely can disguise itself to appear as a ghost or a bad ghost. So maybe you've been dealing with demons all along, you just don't know any better.
Well, if you take the Christian aspect of it, biblically, that's the ghosts are nothing but evil. And they do often mimic or lie to us as they talk about demons, and anything from the underworld, Satan's world does it. They're great deceivers. They lie all the time. Right. And I've experienced ghosts that were lying to us. I've experienced that.
Oh, ghosts that can lure you into certain areas where you're more affected. Spirits that can affect you physically, mentally, and health-wise, like the one I've experienced at the sheriff's department many years ago that made me sick. The haunted house I lived in, in New Mexico back in the 80s. Whatever was
Sure.
whatever was haunting that place was not friendly, and you knew it. There was no doubt about it. It just always reminded you it was in charge and it was going to do whatever it wanted to do. Pretty
The
weird.
stories I've heard about that house, not only from you, but your sister. Um, wow, that
Yeah,
place, there is something really, really wrong with that.
pretty crazy. Now, demons predate Christianity by quite a while. It's a Greek. I got some notes here I wrote down. The term demon is derived from the Greek word daemon, which means a supernatural being or a spirit. It was not always identified as a mean spirit or something bad. It
Mhm.
just meant it was a supernatural being. It was Christianity that kind of rewrote the whole chapter on demons after they took it from the Greeks and put a negative attribute to it. So demons have been around a long, long, long time. I mean, if you look back, the early Sumerians and stuff, they had demons, and
Again, in the Mid East,
yeah,
as an example of that.
in a Muslim faith and
Mhm.
Islamic faith, they have jinns. Yeah,
Yeah. But the one thing that's common to all of it, regardless of what name you give it, it's all names that have been derived from man.
it's always the same thing, just a different religion painting a different name or a color or a theme to it.
Mhm.
And I've always said that with with religious people, like here in New Mexico, I deal with a lot of Catholic people and some Protestants and a few Mormons, but they all see things according to their religion. If you're Catholic, then the next thing you're going to see is an angel or it's the devil himself. If you're Mormon, then you see Brigham Young out there picking up something, or the angel Moroni is handing you tablets. They all You can't control your religion. It's a different way of saying that. So I'm kind of an atheist. I know you're probably Christian, but you are that way by choice. Your
Mhm.
soul, if you were born in Israel right now, there's a 99% chance you would be Jewish
Mhm.
and you would not even believe in Jesus. And whatever you thought of was correct. Or if you were born in an Islamic nation, most likely you'd be Islamic right now and you'd be
Mhm.
following the Abrahamic faith. So, which one of these do you tie? Which one is it's a
Well,
conundrum. It's huge.
well, I do profess to be of the Christian faith. There's no doubt about that. But the one thing I've come to understand is everything, regardless of its Jewish, Muslim, Christian, whatever, all of those are monikers and rules put on by man. Now, there's discussion that it's based upon scripture, whether it be the Torah or the Bible, whatever, but it's based upon that. But it's still written by man, which does leave, in my opinion, the possibility of error or interpretation, whatever the interpretation of that person is. But you brought up,
Possibility.
well, yeah,
It was
but you
300
brought
years, 300 years after the fact.
touche.
That'd be like me writing about. It'd be like me writing about the Salem witch trials right now.
Yeah, but you still brought up a good point. This is still, no matter what religion, look at the American Indians. There's often comparison between the religious spiritual beliefs of the American Native Americans and Christians that are similar, just different names and maybe a few things switched around, but they're essentially the same. That tells me is there's a common thread that everybody is seeing the same thing, just
Right.
describing it differently. And let's be honest with you, who's ever in charge at the time is going to make it their rule and their
Yeah.
law. So that's,
History's written by the victors.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But
But
you're right. They all have something in common. They all worship a greater, bigger entity or being that's out there.
but
Whether it's
generally speaking, all talk about evil too.
yeah, they all have their form of evil.
And evil entities. So what I'm getting at is there's a common thread that just different groups of people have possibly interpreted differently, and that's once again one of the questions. And therefore, what are the demons? Are they just a grumpy spirit? Are they the elementals or nature spirits, or are they just something that's just god awful ugly that was put on here to torture us?
What if there's an entirely different life form? The demons are. They're just like aliens. Maybe Like you wouldn't think of aliens to be anything like us. Uh, Maybe demons are just something completely undiscovered, something new that nobody knows anything about, except for what history has written about them. Except for his ugly three-armed thing with lots of fangs and teeth, or something like that. But what exactly are demons?
Then we get back to that same thing we've been talking about, the dimensional theory.
Hmm.
Could this be could this be just something that's phasing in and out, something that's there in another dimension that occasionally comes to visit us? Well, I don't know, but have you ever personally in your because I know you've investigated quite a bit and you're in a man, such a natural area out there. Have you experienced anything yourself that you would consider demonic? I personally have not. I think the only thing I've run into are grumpy spirits. That's my opinion. But have you what have you about you? What have you experienced?
Anytime I've heard a kid, especially like a little girl or something on an EVP, or sensed the young kid, immediately my red flags go up, and I always think like that's a demon in disguise. That is something trying to be something that's not.
Mhm.
Especially when other things are involved, like really, really, really cold spots, or you just don't feel right, or you all of a sudden get upset stomach, or you know, uh, that's actually only happened to me once or twice, and I always thought that was just television bullshit. But twice on an investigation, that's one wasn't all that long ago, where I started getting ill, like I almost had to throw up unless I left the area, and I'm like, wow, this is real. This has never happened to me before. So something, if there's a nice ghost out there, why is he making me ill? This has got to be something bad. And I would just chalk that up as either a really pissed off, angry spirit that doesn't want us there, or something demonic. And I classify demonic anything that's non-human that wants to hurt me. Are there good demonic spirits out there? Maybe we've encountered them already. But if it's non-human, it's like not something that we know of that has died, and it wants to hurt me. In my book, that's a demonic spirit.
Okay, so do you think that your personal belief, if I got this right, is that demonic spirits have never ever been here before, but do you have a thought or an opinion where they came from, how they were created?
Well, that opens up a Pandora's box of all kinds of stuff.
Let's open it.
We
Let's
have to
open it.
talk. We have to talk a little bit of religion. We have to talk angels, because one thing that if you're a true believer in the Christian faith, or most of the faiths, and you read about angels, angels are not humans. When you die, you will never be an angel. Angels were had no sex organs, for one thing. They didn't reproduce like humans. They were not humans. Angels were they were like God, or whoever this dude was, or it was, his personal people, his personal army, his personal protectors. He had archangels and all these, Satan, fallen angel. Uh, these beings were all angels. Where did they come from? They were nothing like us. We don't have wings coming out of our back, and
Mm.
physically that would be impossible. Your wings would have to be 15, 20 feet sticking out each side, especially lift my fat ass off the ground. Wouldn't work. So,
Wouldn't even go there. Well, but once again, what we see as an angel
but angels,
is
every
what
religion talks about angels. It's not something that was
ri-
just made up.
right, but that vision of what an angel is what humans perceive it to be. It could be something completely different that we cannot even comprehend what they look like. What are your thoughts there?
Well, if you believe the books that are written on them,
By
fairly
man.
by man, it describes what, because the book written by man is supposed to prophesize what the prophets said, who were ultimately the authority in what was going on. Even though they talk about it 300 years later, and there's not a written record of any of the apostles or anything. It's all hearsay. But they all have a pretty much a common conclusion that this is what angels look like. They were pretty much God's personal soldiers, and they were non-human. They had no sex organs. They didn't reproduce like humans did, and they had wings
They,
coming out of their back.
but they're
And they could be
depicted
really
as
pissy.
human.
They could be really bad.
Yeah, yeah. But they're depicted as humans with wings.
I think that's in the more modern era.
Okay.
Uh, I think if you go further back, they're not very human. Well, they do look humanoid. I mean, they're definitely bipedal and stuff,
Mhm.
but they have wings. I mean, my
Yeah.
dog had wings coming out of his back. I wouldn't call him a dog anymore. I'd call him a, I'm like, what the hell is that thing? A dragon? And so if a human has giant wings that he can fold up on his back, that's
Mhm.
not really a human anymore.
Mhm.
But that's at least the way I see it.
So we really don't know. You don't have an opinion where they might have come from. I know I don't. Because I have not a
I don't think
clue.
anybody does. I think anybody can conjecture and just, heavily lean on their faith and hope they're correct on their faith, even though there's a million different faiths out there. And scientifically, nobody knows where we came from. I mean, yes, we climbed out of the primordial slop out there in Florida somewhere at low tide, but
Oh,
that's
it's
not
called red
really
tide.
possible. That's not even possible either. You don't think? So where did all this start, and where did we come from? And then whoever created us, or however we evolved, certainly they made other things. Obviously, they made animals and stuff, but what kept them from making demons, angels, or anything? I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
are we it? Are
Well,
we it?
and there goes back to that eternal question that we ask: Are we it? Is this it? What else? Where are we going? Where do we come from? And that once again is what we're trying to figure out with this whole mess. But getting back to the definition between ghosts and demons, do you think there's a relationship between the two? And what I mean by that, are they somehow connected in the same realm or dimension? Are they two separate entities that come to us at different times? Uh,
I think they're totally different things. I think
okay,
they're not connected at the least. They may coexist out there in the ether of
okay,
whatever the hell's out there, and I think you could
okay.
probably summon either or. You could probably conjure up something really, really scary and bad that's non-human if done correctly. I wouldn't know.
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to try because my biggest fear would be that if you could really conjure up a entity that's non-human or a demon, what is it capable of doing to you? Can it get into your body? Can it get into your head and make you crazy? Maybe all these crazy people that are in these psych wards, or used to be psych wards, maybe they were all demonically possessed. Maybe they just had an
Well,
encounter with a being that
a lot of people
destroyed their brain.
believe that. Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of people have believed that. Now, you coming from Germany, um, being an American, we don't really have a lot of those same stories that folks from Europe do. Uh, and what first thing that comes to my mind is it's the Thin Man that I think started in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, or the creature called the Thin Man, or the guy. They now depict him as being a tall, skinny
Slender
humanoid
Man.
creature with a black Slender Man. That's the word, in a
Yeah.
black suit or something. That's German, isn't it?
I'm not really sure where that originated from. I
Okay,
didn't hear about it until maybe 15, 20 years ago. I may have been
what
born
is
in Germany and lived in Germany, but I'm an American.
right? Oh, no, no, no. I know that, but what I'm getting at is you also had the ability to be exposed to different stories that we really didn't get a whole lot here because it's a newer country, and certainly Germany, Ireland, Scotland, Europe, France, everybody is so much older and is much deeper when it comes to history and legends.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely. Although
are
a
you?
lot of it was brought over by the Pilgrims. I mean, they brought a lot of
Oh,
their
that
belief systems over here with them.
they
But
were, and that's just my. I could be totally wrong, but just in my opinion, my thought is that it's just so much more deeply ingrained in the older uh,
I
cultures.
do re- I do remember, when I was younger, I went to church and living in Germany, and there was a lot of discussions about demons and the devil and all that stuff. So it's definitely in full effect over there. I mean, they truly believe in the devil and the demon and all that stuff. Um,
But
they
isn't that connected with "you better be good or they're going to get you" type of
maybe
discussion?
maybe. I mean, the devil was never depicted as having horns or hoofs up
Mhm.
until like the 13th century or
Right.
somewhere back in then. Back then the devil was just like a demonic person, just a bad, bad person.
Mhm.
Non-human, but something bad. They didn't start adding hoofs and horns to it until much later.
Mhm.
Mainly
That's
because
what I
if you ever looked into a goat's eyes, you could see why they would make that association. Because goats have eyes like a cat; they have these slits in their eyes. Their pupils are elongated,
oh,
and
did not know that.
although goats are very, very cute and friendly, But if you were going to assign an animal to take devil's form, I mean, the goat or a cat would probably be the best choice, or
Cat,
alligator.
I think we may, okay, those are evil, those critters. Um, the cat, we talked about this, I think, last show, was considered a familiar in going back into the medieval times in witchcraft, and the familiar being basically a demon that was assigned to a witch to make sure they were protected and got what they needed. So that's cats have been associated with that for generations. But once again, man-made, or is there something that was there something that happened historically that directly connected them? I think it's more of a man-made
I do
belief.
too. I think it was selectively bred into them. And, I've had cats, and they are very intuitive. I mean, there's something about a cat. They can see things and hear things that other animals not so much. Some dogs are really good at it too. But I
I
think it
would.
was bred into them because if you cats go back so far, I mean, the pharaohs had
Hmm.
cats,
Hmm.
domesticated cats, and the same with dogs. The Chihuahua. I just recently found out that the Chihuahua was actually bred by the Mayans, and it was they called it. Well, they didn't call it, but they referred to it as a water bottle, a warm water bottle, because Chihuahuas like crawling underneath the covers. So they were selectively bred to be these tiny little dogs that get underneath the covers with you and keep you warm. You know,
Really?
I'm like, well, I didn't know that. That would explain a lot about Higgins. He's part Chihuahua, but and this,
Uh-huh.
this brings back a whole different topic. But since this is a show where we just kind of ramble on about whatever pops in our heads, but we try to stay on the subject. But real quick, like dogs, you can go back to 5,000 BC, and the Egyptians and the early Sumerians already had domesticated, weird-looking dogs. All dogs derive from a wolf. The
Hmm.
wolf is the A animal. Everything was. When in the hell did they start breeding dogs to come out to start looking like poodles and chihuahuas and Labradors when the Egyptians and Sumerians already had dogs that looked like that? 20,000 years ago? I mean, you can't just make a freaking poodle or chihuahua out of a wolf overnight.
Well, it does. I do not know the answer to that one. I
That's
do not
weird,
know
huh?
the answer. Yeah, it is, and there's so much study to be done about these ancient cultures and religions and how they did stuff like that. And you bring up a good point. How did that happen so quick? Maybe they came from somewhere else.
And then there was a big stop in everything in evolution between 10 and 11,000 years ago, the Younger Dryas period, where every religion, all the religions have a great flood story,
Mhm.
where the flood, in some religions that God was really pissed off and he just erased the whole board and said, we're going to start out new. In other religions, it's just a giant meteor strike and it just flooded every freaking thing. But it's been proven that between 10 and 11,000 years, humans were almost extinct. I think they were down to like 15,000 humans in the world because this giant ice age hit. So if this happened 10,000 years ago, you're telling me in 10,000 years you took wolves and turned them into poodles and chihuahuas and pugs and boxers? That's pretty damn quick. Why haven't they done it with
Yeah,
anything else? Why haven't you turned your alligator into this cute little toy lizard? There's plenty of time for that. Well, any animal, any animal. It's
shoot,
just
alligators. That's a prehistoric animal almost when you look at it.
it hasn't changed at
I
all.
yeah,
It looks the same as it did, 50,000 years ago.
I do not know the answer to that one, Ike.
See, there's a lot of stuff
And
that makes no sense. That's why a show like this is important because it makes other people just think, even though we're not scientists and most scientists don't have the answer to it, but it makes you think. It's the ultimate question, like how in the heck did this happen without intervention from some other dimension or some other world or some other spirit?
well, if we could find a guest, if anybody out there is watching, maybe that is more learned in the world of evolution, prehistoric evolution, come on the show, talk to us about it. Inform us and inform other folks, because the questions we're asking are the same questions a lot of folks are asking. How did this happen? So if there's somebody out there that has this knowledge, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, because you hear all about the human evolution, that once again there's two sides. You got the well, I can't think of his name right now, but we evolved probably from primates
Oh, Darwin.
350. Darwin's 350,000 years ago. At first it was 20,000, then it was 100,000, 150,000. Now they've found humanoids 350,000 years old. That's a long, long time. If you looked at the evolutionary scale, if you took the evolutionary scale and made it 1 foot long, our modern civilization would be less than an eighth of an inch.
Yeah,
What
and I've seen
happened? What
I've
happened in
seen
all this
some
time?
interesting timelines, and they're still trying to add some new uh, discoveries in there of groups that maybe have intermingled and it created an entirely new version of the species. So there's some work going on with that right now.
Yeah, like Neanderthals and all that stuff. I have a
Mhm.
friend. He took his DNA test. It came back 2% Neanderthal. I'm like, that explains a lot.
Really? Well, I've heard of people actually getting that, and I find that really, really fascinating.
A lot of
That
Western
explain you.
Europeans.
That would
What?
explain you.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm not Neanderthal. I'm a higher being than that.
How are you? Okay.
More
All right.
cultured.
I guess so. Okay.
But anyway,
Anyway,
off the topic of dogs showing up out of nowhere on the evolutionary scale in the last 10,000 years that have been bred into something that we can't hardly even recognize anymore, and other things have not been uh, divine intervention.
well, now yeah, now we're going down another term is what is divine intervention? Is it the spiritual answer? Is there something on the other side that is helping to develop us? And maybe that's where the demon issue comes from? Or is it somebody from I don't know, some other galaxy that has come and done that?
That's the one I would stick with, and I've thought that since I was a young kid and read *Chariots of the Gods* by Eric
Mm,
von Däniken, because that's the
mhm.
kind of theory. And it must have stuck with me. I was probably like 8 years old when I read that. But to me, that makes the most sense because I think we've said this before. How can we have 345,000 years of humans and they haven't done anything? And then suddenly humans just, their brains expanded, everything fell in place. And then human history, at its best is 5,000 years old. And
Yeah.
especially according to religious teachings, the earth is only 5,000 years old. But we didn't really start evolving until 5,000 years, yet we've been around for 345,000 years before that and didn't do a damn thing. Just walking around, dragging our knuckles, just like some animal out there in the wild. No cognitive or tool use or just being nothing. And then all of a
Mhm.
sudden something happened. Wouldn't it make more sense that this planet was visited by something and either used us as, to maybe refresh their gene pool or
Okay.
crossbreed with us to refresh our gene pool to bring their intelligence to us, or to enslave us to make us something that they can use later on. But something must have intervened.
Yeah, and it makes me immediately go back to our dimensional talks before of is that stuff that's phasing in and out, and is that where we're getting the demons and ghosts from? And is that how people are traveling, getting back and forth? Ooh, we're getting deep.
Yeah,
But
this is an
I
interesting
don't get
conversation because that's the kind of conversation most people think about. Another conversation or another thing people think about, at least I used to a lot, is the things that you can't possibly comprehend. The size of the universe. It never ends. And if it does end, I mean, they say the universe is expanding at the speed of light. That's incredibly fast. And
Mhm,
but it never ends. How is that even
mhm,
possible? And what if everything has to end somewhere? It just can't go on forever.
mhm.
What's on the other side? What if you did hit the end? You stuck your head out. Like, what's
Do you
there?
remember the do you remember the T that was a movie? Oh gosh, what was the name of it? Jim Carrey was in it. He played a kid in a dome, and his whole world was in this it ended up
Is
being in this dome, and I can't think of the name of the movie now.
Yeah, I remember it.
But y- that's an interesting thought because there look, somebody's on the other side of the universe, but that's really not the case, is it? So once again,
Maybe they're
how
like
far?
parallel universe. Maybe they're just right next to you. Maybe our universe isn't as big as it is. Maybe it's just a fishbowl. Somebody's staring down at it. And to us, it seems incredibly big because we're incredibly
Mhm.
small.
And maybe that's where we're getting. And I got to go back to this dimensional thing then. And I never thought I would actually believe in this.
Hmm.
I mean, I've always, when I first started this, it was more of a crossing over to heaven or something in between heaven. But this dimensional thing is, and understanding a little bit about Einstein's theories, I can't help but wonder maybe that is what this is all about. Maybe that's where we get things like deja vu and things crossing over. If that's the case, that would explain why we get these creatures, demons passing through here.
Mhm. Deja vu is another good topic. How many times have you sang a song in your head or whistled a tune and turned on the radio and there it is? How many
Mhm,
times have you thought of somebody that you haven't heard from in a long time and your phone rings? How
mhm.
many times have you walked into a place and seemed strikingly like I've done this before? You know, you've never been
Yeah.
there, but it seems so familiar, like, "Oh, I've been here before." That happens to me a lot.
Well, there's a guy named Richard Sennett, a well-known ghost hunter. He worked with many of the early folks, especially out west, and he likes to tell a story of a young lady he talked to, and she kept she kept seeing this house in her dreams, right? And one day and it was somewhere in California. I can't remember all the details now, but she's now visiting this town, and she's driving down the road. And she's, I believe, in a taxi cab, and she sees the house in her dreams,
Mhm.
right? Stop the car, and she goes up and she knocks on the door, right? The people that answered say, "You're the girl we see in the house."
Oh, wow.
And I'm sure I'm butchering that story a little bit, but that's essentially what happened. She dreams about it. She sees it. She knocks on the door. The people in the house say, "You're the one we've seen in our house." And she's never been there before.
Yeah.
Now, that's either just a bold face lie, a manufactured story just to, get people excited, or it happened. And if it happened, you've got to ask, how could it have?
Where did this
And
information come from?
where did it come from? One of my favorite stories, and I don't know if we're going to get in trouble for this, but I want to show this book real quick. Um, it's called, oh, where is it? It has to do with a young, yeah, Soul Survivor. Here it is, right here. This book right here. Not to improperly give a plug on it. I don't know. There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
I think I've
The
read that.
story, it's about the Leninger family, and this young boy at age 3, right, starts talking about airplanes. Now, his family's got nothing to do with aviation, nothing to do with the military, but he he loves airplanes. He constantly is drawing pictures. As a young child, he's drawing pictures of this ocean battle with a big mountain with a big or island with a big mountain on it, and planes going down on fire and men falling out of it. And he keeps talking about the little man, the little man. The little man's on fire. One time and I'm really just paraphrasing this interesting story all the way through. He goes to a museum and sees an airplane, and he identifies it as a Corsair. And his parents don't even know what a Corsair is, right? And the mom says, "Oh, look at all the bombs on the underneath it." And the little boy Jimmy, I believe his name was Jimmy. Um, I believe his name was, yeah, James. He says, "Mom, those aren't bombs; those are drop tanks." How many
How would
five
he know that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And to make a very long story real short, dad didn't believe it, but the stories kept coming. The kids started having nightmares, and the father ended up doing a bunch of checking and found out um, that the boy was describing an incident off of Chichijima, which is next to Iwo Jima in the South Pacific, and a escort carrier, which is a smaller aircraft carrier called the Natoma Bay. And he ended up being able to piece it all together and found out that this older guy, and I don't want to give it too much of it away, but I'm going to look at some of the pictures here because I always have to look at pictures in books. I just thought
Especially
I'd say that.
coloring
I,
books.
I, I thought I'd get there before you did. What did okay, Jane, hold on here. I'm going to look at this guy's name here real quick. James Houston was a pilot who ended up dying in an aircraft called a Hellcat, F6F Hellcat. But he was able to attach little Jimmy, to this other James Houston later on, who flew off the Natoma Bay, and what the little kid was talking about was confirmed by his shipmates that the father interviewed later. And he talked about how he was shot down in flames, and that's what happened to James Houston. Now, once again, I'm just chopping up the story a little bit, and there's many, many people out there that have shot down the story, if you'll excuse the pun, but have basically said that the kid, it was all made up, that these flaws are in it, so it can't be real. But if you read the book and you have an open mind, unless it's once again a bald-faced concocted story lie, which I assume is possible, but nobody's ever come out and said that. How did this kid talk about being James 2?
Yeah.
Because James 1 died in the airplane when it was on fire. Wow. Once again, we're talking reincarnation. Is that dimensions? Is that, I don't know.
Something intervening. You know, we've talked about this too, intuitions of police officers. Where's this information coming from? You know, I'm sure it's caution. Your brain is using everything it can to be cautious and telling you, you know, be careful, be careful. But sometimes you get information that's out of this realm. You know, I've had many, many. I remember I used to do always driver's side approaches on traffic stops on this one road because there's no shoulder and you didn't want to walk through the weeds and get bit by a snake while you're walking up to the damn passenger side. And made a traffic stop, single male in the car, and something's just, my body's tingling, something's not feeling right. I decided to walk around behind my unit and do a passenger approach, which through the tumbleweeds and, you know, stuff like that. And I will get up all the way to the passenger window and I shine the flashlight in there, and he's got a rifle laying across his lap, pointing right out the window. I'm like, that's divine intervention. That's something told me, you know, something knew there was something wrong and made me do what I did. And that information had to have come from somewhere.
Yeah, and that gets overlooked a lot. I mean, you can blame some things on the conditions, the time of day, maybe getting yourself worked up over the last call you were on makes you more cautious this time. You can use all those explanations, but there are just some times, and if you're out there and you're a cop, you know it. Sometimes something just tells you, don't wait for your backup.
I've actually acted on another one. You know, I was probably a 3 or 4 year cop, and there's a Highway 60, Route 66, and it's a desolate road out there. And I strayed away from the pack, and I said I was going to run some traffic way out there, probably 30 miles away from the city. And it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and you hardly see any cars. And I just wanted to go out there to see if I see any UFOs or any weird shit in the sky. That's really what my intention was, being lazy. But I'm driving east on this road, and I see headlights coming at me, and I look down at my radar, and it's doing like 105. I'm like, holy smoke. So before it even passes me, I already got my lights engaged. I'm like, I'm going to pull this sucker over. You know, you're a young rookie cop. You want to kick some ass. So I make a U-turn, and it takes me a long time to catch up to this guy. I finally catch up to it and pull over. It's a white Cadillac with Illinois license plates. And there's 5 males sitting in this car. They're all black. Most of them are bald like me. And completely out of place in New Mexico. You've been here, you know that's incredibly rare. And my body was just screaming like, you stupid ass. What have you done? You're not going to be able to outshoot 5 of these guys. I'm like, if a door opens up, you need to just throw your car in reverse and haul ass. So I'm sitting there thinking about this for a second.
That was before we carried rifles in our cars too, I bet.
I had a rifle. I had an AR-15, but still, something just didn't feel right. So I was embarrassed to say this for the longest time. And then as I became an instructor in many of the art forms of law enforcement, I made this part of my story because it made the younger cops feel better. I said, you know what I did? I turned my lights off, made a U-turn, and went the other direction, pretending I had something more important to do. Now, those guys in that Cadillac, they could have just been perfectly normal people, and they're like, holy crap, that cop just left. They were probably like, hey. Or they could have been hauling whatever they were hauling, and being out in the middle of nowhere where I was, it would have been a very bad situation for me. And I said, this is not worth it for me right now. And something told me turn around. So I made a U-turn and left. Chalked it off as like, yep, you guys can go ahead. Because there was no backup. It was just me, and I was totally outnumbered. Like I said, I was embarrassed to tell that story for many years. And then I'm like, well, I'm here to tell you the story. If I didn't turn around, I might not even be here to tell that story, because oddly enough, not that much later, right down the road from there, a police officer got killed. So live and learn.
I'll tell you what. big difference, folks, from where I policed here in pretty much Metro Florida, even the quieter areas, you still had backup within a few minutes. Where this man policed, you're out there by yourself on dozens of miles of nothing,
Half hour.
and
The
you've
average was
and
half
you've
hour.
got and you got no backup out there at all, and that's where intuition comes into play. So was it you just realizing the odds, or was it somebody saying, dude, now's not the time? And I've come to the personal belief that all of this is connected. There's a reason for everything, and call
It
that
was
woo
more
woo
than
or
just
whatever.
yeah, it was more than just realizing the odds because it
Yeah.
literally I could feel it coursing through my body. I mean, my blood was boiling. I was, you know, adrenaline was dumping, and something was just screaming at me like, "Don't do this! Don't do this! Don't do this!" So
Mm, I've
I'd
been
like
there.
to chalk it up. Now, the question is, if there's such thing as outside intervention, if something can influence what you do, spirits, ghosts, demons, why don't they ever give you some tangible information like, when I was 6 years old, I buried a toy car out in the yard next to the oak tree. Go out there and dig it up. Now that would be the proof in the pudding for me. I'm like, holy crap, that's pretty good information. Why doesn't that ever happen?
Because maybe it's not supposed to,
There you go. And
and
maybe it does happen.
how?
There's a incident in England. I'm sure Chris would know about this guy, but there's a metal detector guy who found the largest Saxon hoard of gold
Mhm.
I think ever found.
That's
And
recent, isn't it? Wasn't that
it's
fairly
probably been
recently?
like 5, 6 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
And he was out with a cheap metal detector, but I read the story on it because I do metal detecting too occasionally. But this guy would go out and say a little prayer, and he on this dig, and he prayed to the Saxon gods, please. You had in typical British form, kind of pompous, but saying, let me
Ooh.
find the Saxon hoard that was buried years ago. He had a whole little poem rhyme going on, just trying to appease the Saxon gods. And within like minutes, gets a hit on his metal detector and digs up the largest Saxon hoard of Saxon and Celtic gold that was just stashed there. And I'm like, wow. And England, I think,
Ooh.
has these rules like everything you find belongs to the museum, not the museum. They have this outside agency, I think, that takes all this
It's
stuff, and
called British Heritage. They call it British Heritage, I think.
if nobody claims it, you get it back or something like that. And this guy ended up with most of it. He donated a ton of it because there was some like sword hilts and stuff that were inlaid with jewels and
Mhm,
fascinating looking. A lot of the gold was smashed. There was a lot of like Viking stuff, Viking gold, but it
mhm.
was all smashed up. I guess maybe to make it easier to carry or whatever they were doing, but most of it was smashed. But was that divine intervention or just one lucky dude?
I've always felt that the other side is not out there, nor do they want to give you a unfair advantage, for lack of a better term. So that's why praying to find the gold and then doing it wouldn't make sense. But if it's what you were talking about, just the other side, wanting to show, hey, we're here, we're listening, and maybe you hid this yourself 300-400 years ago.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. Interesting. I didn't hear that part of the story. I remember reading about the finding of this gold, but I didn't hear about this part of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of that's fascinating.
There's definitely a source of information that you can tap into. Well, I can't, but some people can. Uh, and one of my old IDK videos, I mentioned the couple that was walking down the interstate that knew everything there was about my police officers.
Oh,
You know,
that's a creepy story.
that's an honest to God true story. I'm like, when my female officer came back and said, these people are pretty weird. They know shit that, of course, they were from Florida, but she knew stuff that she shouldn't have known. I'm like, get out of here. I was a lieutenant or a captain at the time. I'm like, I got to see what the hell's going on. And I drove out there, and they knew so much about me. And then I was a captain, and my lieutenant shows up, and she knew everything about the lieutenant. So I'm thinking, these people are in town. They're talking to people. They've probably seen our police department calendar hanging on the wall and got information from there. Not the information they were getting. Not the information that my lieutenant had just been divorced, that he's going to get a new wife and have a new child. Not the information of my daughter and my son. This woman knew that I had a son that's not living with me anymore, and that I have a daughter. And how the heck? And the odd looking people. They were like Haitians, want to say we're Haitians or somewhere like Caribbean type, but
Mm.
she was probably in her 80s and really tiny woman, and she had the weirdest thing. She had bright red lips, and she put lipstick on her eyelids. So you can imagine what that looks like. She had bright red
Yeah.
eyelids too, and her
Wow.
son was like 6'4", super skinny and sounded like Bob Marley. And
Mhm.
both of them just knew way too much information to where it was spooky. And being a typical joker like I am, I'm like, hey, how about giving me the lottery numbers for tomorrow?
That's a
And
nice comment.
he's like, oh, we can't do that. That's gonna make a lot of people mad. I'm
And
like,
that's what I was getting at before with the bit, the guy finding the gold, the Viking gold. Folks that have this ability often say, "No, they're not. The other side's not going to give you things that will allow you to enhance yourself that way." But did this couple ever say to you or ask you why or how they knew all this?
no, no. And I had to ask him over and over. I'm like, how in the hell do you know that? And they would just laugh at this weird, giggle thing going on, and they didn't want any help. They were pushing a shopping cart. He was pushing a shopping cart down the interstate. That's the reason for the call. People were calling saying there's too close to the line of traffic. Uh, they didn't want any. We carry blankets, emergency food, and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, can I give you guys a food voucher? We got tons of restaurants. I can give you a food voucher. You both can go have a burger. No, nope. Don't want to be any trouble to you guys. You don't need my problems. We're doing fine. They didn't
Did
want
they
any help.
say where they were going with their
Back to Florida.
back to Florida?
Yeah. I
Okay,
don't know where the heck. I remember asking where they came from, but I can't remember where they said they were coming from. But they're going back to Florida. I'm like, you got a
interesting.
long ways to walk. I said, I can get you a bus ticket to the next town at least, 50 miles east of here. Nope, nope, don't want it.
Now, when's the last time there was any contact with this couple? Did they just disappear or was
Nah,
it,
we,
you know,
they just
lost
wandered
track of?
off. I'm sure. Yeah, they just wandered off. So pretty bizarre, though, huh?
Well, yeah,
So
and
how would they know this stuff?
I do not know. I do not know. Once again, those mysteries that we just keep talking about, and we we keep. It's funny because we start off on a topic, but somehow, like we always find our way back to this.
Yeah.
How? How does this occur, or how do these things happen? And I really think that's what drives me is trying to figure out the hows, whys. And I don't know that we're ever supposed to know, but I can't help myself.
Well, I
I
think there's
gotta
a
keep looking.
part of the population are inquisitive, and we fall into that realm. Probably that's why we became cops. Like I've said before, as a cop, you're a professional rubbernecker. Before you became a cop, you were probably just as bad when you seen a wreck on the road. You're like twisting your head, trying to slow down, see what's going on. Well, as a cop, you're getting paid to do that. So we're professional, nosy people. We want to be in the middle of everything
Well,
and have our two cents worth.
I'll tell you a story real quick that it kind of when I was a kid, we had our own detective agency. Yeah, I was like 9 or 10 years old, and we were convinced that these people behind us in the alley behind us up in Ohio were selling dope, and we were snooping around. We got awful dumb things, but danged if they did, the people that didn't finally get arrested. I don't know what it was, drugs or something, but they finally took everybody out of there. But I was doing that crap when I was 9, 10, 11 years old. So I guess it's the natural inquisitive that you're talking about. But I never had an experience. You've had experience as a kid. I didn't.
Yeah.
Now my brother, this is interesting. Getting back to elementals and stuff like that. We were living for a short period in, I think it was Arizona. And my brother talks about waking up one night, one morning, I don't, it was still dark out, and seeing a creature 2 feet tall that looked like a gnome. Now, of course, you hear this stuff. Oh, what was Tom at the time? Maybe 6 or 7. You just blow it off as a kid's fantasy, as my parents
Hmm.
did. But Tom, to this day, says, Larry, I'm telling you, I saw this creature walk across the floor. He looked at me, he turned, and then he walked through the door. And I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't asleep. I saw it.
Little people.
How many? Yeah, and people hear those stories all the time. How about all the stories that of little creatures that come out from underneath the bed? They've made movies about it and stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And I told you about my buddy Marty, who worked on the res, and they chased a little creature across the
Oh,
stadium floor
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah, yeah.
front of a packed freaking gymnasium. So there was a ton of people that seen it, but that just like I always say, you can have a million people witness an event, and it still means absolutely nothing because the other 10 billion people are just going to say, "Oh, mass hallucination, swampcast."
Well, well, how can some people see it at the how could in a stadium of 5,000 people, how could 2,500 see it and 25 not?
Right.
Maybe that goes back to what I was talking about when we first started discussing that theory of Dr. McAndrews. Maybe it's just how we process things, or do we look at things more of in the intuitive way, or are we very analytical, number crunching type of individual?
Hmm. And I also think your brain from being a child, because kids see a lot of spirits, they see a lot of unseen things. But as your brain
Yep.
develops, it's like an empty computer. It gets filled up with data. And in a kid's world, the data comes predominantly from its parents, unless you're New Mexican
Mhm.
and it's just parent singular. Singular. But
Wow, dude.
sad but true. But that information coming in embeds itself. I sound like I'm know what I'm talking about, but I have no clue. But that's just my thoughts. It embeds itself in your brain, and it becomes a product of the rest of your life. There's
Oh
so many
yeah.
things your parents have taught you that you cling on to for dear life, even though you know it's wrong. You know, it's
Mhm.
simple things like oil. My daddy used Pennzoil 30 weight for everything, and I'm still using it 20 years later because it's the best oil ever. That's something your daddy told you, and it stayed in your brain, and that's the gospel. That's what you believe in.
Mhm.
Is that applies to religion when you grow up as a little child with religious beliefs? It's embedded in your brain, and even though your conscience tells you, you know, half of that sounds like bullshit, but I kind of like it. I'd rather not know, and I'm just going to keep going with the status quo because that's what it
And people
is.
and
You know,
people
it's
like
the
that.
community. It's the community. It's going to church. It's my friends. Why would I give all that up? You know, my entire life is based on that. I can't give that up. So many people are just stuck in this round circle they go on from everything they've learned, and to them, that's their world, and they don't want to know any different. Your analogy of Abraham Lincoln sitting in my office and me and him smoking a pipe together, they don't want to hear that kind of crap. They don't care. Abraham Lincoln's dead. There's no way he could be sitting in your office, and that's all there's to it.
But getting back to what you said about kids seeing more, I think it's even more expansive than that. I think a young child, their brains are like sponges and they're taking everything in, but they're also not cluttered with the day-to-day life that we as adults have to deal with, paying
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
bills, getting food. So these kids are more open, and I think that's why kids see things because their minds are still drinking in information. They're still um, seeing things that we don't because we're too busy worried about paying the bills. And
Yep.
that's why kids see it, but then they later in later years they forget because then the adult life kicks into play. But I think kids are like sponges and they're so open because they've got nothing else cluttering their mind. They are more susceptible to seeing what's on the other side. How many times have you talked to a kid that's got an imaginary friend? And probably a lot of times it is just an imaginary friend, but is it all the time?
My son had a whole freaking slew of imaginary friends. He had names for them, weird names, like non-human names, like made-up names.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
You gotta wonder. You just gotta wonder. And you know, this goes back to something I say all the time. Everybody can't that sees this can't be nuts. That would make at least almost half the world nuts because 50% they say around 50% of the population has had some sort of experience.
I bet you it's more than that. I think
Oh,
the other
yeah.
50% don't want to talk about it.
And I think that's probably true. And there's some folks that I don't think have, and that may be occurring for a bunch of different reasons, whether it's their vibration, whether it's their cognitive style of analyzing things, or what. There's some people that don't for reasons yet we have not put our finger on.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think more than half has
I
had
would think
something
so.
happen.
Even some of the most religious people I've used to work with, you know, if you get them on an off day and they're willing to talk to you, they've all had weird experiences. On a normal day today, you ask them, you believe in ghosts? Nah, oh, God would never allow ghosts. Nah, bullshit. You die, you go to heaven or hell. That's it. But then you
Yeah.
catch them on another day, and I'm like, yeah, well, my dad and I were doing this one day, and we've seen this happen and that happen. That's unexplainable. I'm like, hello, you seen a ghost? They're everywhere.
Mhm.
Keep your eyes open.
Yeah.
But back to demons.
Demons.
Demons? I don't know. So like I said, to me, a
Today,
demon is
Satan.
to me, a demon is a non-human something out there with bad intentions. That's the way I see a demon.
Is it naturally made? Is it just something that's been here? And you'll talk to folks that are of the pagan faith, and they talk about everything as nature created. So is this just something that, once again, I guess we don't know. We're beating a dead
Is it
horse.
another entity that lives amongst us and it's been around longer than we have? It just doesn't interact with us, or maybe it can't interact with us on a
Here's a
few
thought.
occasions.
Our world as we see it right now, our physical world, is there in this spot right now another dimension of people doing stuff in the same spot at the same time, but in a different vibrational dimension?
There's some
That makes
very
sense?
high-paid scientists that believe so. Many of them. There are a lot of them coming on board with that one.
Mhm. Well, I've on my tours on the beach in Vero, I've had on 2 occasions, mediums tell me, and I am not sensitive in that sense at all. But 2 of them have told me that there are people walking up and down the street at the same time we are. We can't see them, they can't see us, but we're all passing by each other at the same time. Um, I love telling a story from a friend of mine. She's a medium. Her name is Mary Youngblood, and she's down in the Stewart area. And she tells a story about how she was with a friend, and I think her husband or the, the friend's husband or the friend's boyfriend, I can't remember which, they all went into a restaurant in downtown Stewart, had lunch. As they came out, all 3 of them at the same time saw Stewart 100 years ago or 80 years
No,
ago or
that's
whatever.
crazy. That'd be
But
pretty
they
cool.
all saw it. They all saw it, Ike.
Yeah.
And they're like, what the hell? And then it was gone. Came back. No, I think they went back into the building and came out, and it was gone. Now there's another story in England too. Gosh, I got to look this one up, and maybe I'll look it up and I'll share it next time. Where some folks went into a record store in London, and they came out, and the entire town had changed as it was like 40 or 50 years earlier. Then you've got the famous event I think it was in the Louvre in France back around the turn of the last century. 2 teachers suddenly were in the time of Marie Antoinette. Have you ever heard that story?
No, but
Maybe
that'd be a
that
good one.
maybe we'll chat more about that next time,
Yeah.
because that's some fascinating stuff.
I've heard those stories. I've heard several people tell me of waking up in the middle of the night and everything would be daylight in the room. They
Mhm,
could see everything in the room, and they go, "What the hell's all this light?" And then the light would be off. But that
mhm,
happens quite a bit. So it's not the same as stepping into an older century or something, but something happened.
yeah.
Well, speaking of something happening, 2 days ago, I'm lounging around in my hot tub as usual. Come around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun
That
hasn't
is, remember
the
family
sun
show,
hasn't
we
set.
don't wanna.
Sun hasn't
Yeah.
set yet, and the camera crew hasn't showed up yet for my calendar. But I'm sitting there. Not drinking any alcohol or anything like that. Just soaking in the tub, so it was not in my mind. And I look up and I see a yellow light in the sky. And the first thing I think of, hey, that's a hot air balloon. Not a hot air, yeah, a weather balloon, not a hot balloon. A weather balloon, because they're common out here. And so I'm staring at it. I'm like, pretty nice weather balloon. So Christine happens to come into town, and I say, hey, Christine, there's a UFO out here. Christine, my daughter. She goes, where? She comes out and she looks up and she goes, oh, yeah, let me go get the binoculars. So she gets the binoculars, she looks at it, and she goes, I can't really make it out. So I get the binoculars. Now, usually with binoculars, when you look at a weather balloon, you start seeing the silhouette of the balloon and usually whatever's hanging underneath it. Generally, it's a box that's like 10 by 10
Sure it
square
wasn't from
feet.
China? You sure it wasn't from China?
No, well, it gets better.
Oh.
It's not balloon shaped and there's nothing hanging underneath it. It's just a yellow light in the daytime sky, blue sky, nice blue sky for a change out here. So Christine, I hand the binoculars back to Tina, and she looks at it and she goes, "Hey, I think it just separated." I'm like, "What? Give me the damn binoculars back." So I look at it. Now there's the yellow light that I seen, and off to the left, like maybe the 10, 11 o'clock position of it, above it, was like a yellowy halo effect, quite a bit above it, but it was like a shimmery, whitish yellow, flimmery thing above it. Now
Limery.
I hand the binoculars back to Christine, and she goes, "Do you see this?" She goes, "Yeah, what is that?" I'm like, "Hell if I know." And now the shimmery thing and the light itself start getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, and you couldn't see it with the naked eye anymore. And you could still see it with binoculars. And Christina's still observing it, and I'm like, "I can't see it anymore. You still see it?" "Yeah, I see it." Hand me the binoculars back. I look at it. It is still there, but you can't see it with your eyes. So I hand the binoculars back to Christine. She watches it a little longer. She goes, "They're gone. It just disappeared." I'm like, "Bullshit. No, it's gone. It just blinked out." Hand me the binoculars back. I look, it's gone. Weather balloons do not blink out. And whatever it was super high because it was a thin layer of clouds that kind of drifted through. And you can tell it was way above the clouds for sure. But whatever it was disappeared. That night before last, I had the worst sleeping night I've had in a long freaking time. I could not sleep. I tossed and turned. I had nightmare after nightmare. Just a horrible night of sleep. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I was probably abducted and probed again. You know, I'm gonna, hey, that's the last time you're probing me, mister. I'm giving you 20 minutes to stop. But no, I don't know if that correlates or not, but light in the sky, that was pretty cool. That's the first thing it's been a long time since we've seen anything weird in the sky. And definitely chalk that one up as something weird because it wasn't moving. It wasn't an airplane. It was stationary. It was not Saturn or anything like that, like a daytime bright star or anything like that, because it was gone. And later on that night when it was dark, I went back outside and I started scanning the sky to see if anything weird's going out there. And whatever that was disappeared.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Only out the Southwest, folks. That's a crazy place out there.
You never know. You got to look around. See, we live in a fairly decent-sized county. I bet you right now, if there's one other person that's seen that, I'd be really surprised. I'd be really surprised because 99.9% of the people that live in this county, or as in any other place in this country, are either with their phone and their cell phone, or with their nose in their cell phone, or their computer, or they're driving, or they're working, or they're cooking, or they're cleaning. And nobody looks up anymore.
That's true. That's true.
Unless that thing is just hovering in front of your windshield while you're driving, you're not going to notice crap. Very few people.
Which is a shame. Yeah, people need to be need to be aware of their surroundings, for God's sake.
Well, if they're so scared of everything, then they should definitely be aware of surroundings. I mean, it's beneficial on lots of levels, you know, especially in New Mexico and Albuquerque. I mean, God, you take your life in your hands every time you go to that city.
Yeah, that's some tough stuff that goes on there. I got to agree with that. But
so anyway, that was my quick UFO story, and we kind of got way off topic as usual about demons. But to summarize, what we think demons are, well, it's an open book, and everybody I think has a different interpretation of what demons are. Religious folks are going to think demons are cast out devils or something like that. In my world, I've already said 3 times now what I think a demon is. I think a demon is something that's never been a human and will never be a human, but is something that's an entity that's out there somewhere that could potentially be dangerous to you. I don't think I don't know.
Well, once again, we don't know the answers, and we've bantered quite a bit. And obviously, we are not men of science ourselves. So there may be scientists out there that have some sort of maybe part of the answer. But the big thing is we don't know. And folks, I got to tell you, if you get somebody that says definitively it's this or not this, beware, because nobody knows for sure.
And I want to mention this also, that we rely a lot on science. Rightfully, we should, as in our medication and many doctors. But so many of the world's most important discoveries have been made by non-scientist people. Just accidentally amateur hobbyists, amateur astronomers. Astronomers have found stuff flying around out there that the people of NASA didn't see. So a lot of amateur archaeologists have found stuff that's unexplainable, that's changed the record. So don't just think, you have to be a scientist to get involved in our conversations or rely on their word 100%, because you take it in to put it in your toolbox as part of what they say, but it's not set in stone. There are things out there that you personally, may observe or see and report on. You don't have to be Harvard educated to tell me that what you seen in the sky was a weather balloon. I could probably determine that myself. Although what I seen was not a weather balloon. I've seen tons of weather balloons. I've actually seen a weather balloon crash when
Oh,
I was living
really?
in Mountain Air. Yeah, it took
Oh, wow.
forever to come down. It took probably 25, 30 minutes to come down. It had a parachute. It popped, and
Oh, okay.
this huge parachute opened up above it. And me and my son are following it around in the car, trying to see where the heck this thing's going to come down. And it took 25 to 30 minutes, and finally landed in this guy's yard in
Mhm.
a huge box below it. And when it hit the ground, the chute disconnected and draped across the power line and caught a grass fire. And
Oh, Lord.
within about 10 minutes, a NASA plane was circling round and round and round and round, a little twin engine,
Oh,
just
wow.
circling around. And the police showed up and told us all to get the hell away from
Dang
there.
cops. I wanna challenge everybody to look, we wanna come on and visit with you and share our thoughts. Just maybe it's rambling, but it's the thoughts that we have surrounding this mystery that we're investigating. We want you to be involved, and I'm challenging you guys. Send us some notes. Let us know what you think. Give us some things you want to talk about. Give us your thoughts about what we talked about. That way, all of us can work together to maybe find an answer. Because and I think Ike will agree with me, that's the biggest problem we have. We're not working together to find the answers. And we can't unless you guys become part of this conversation. So join us here on this show. Send us your thoughts, send us your comments, what you want to talk about, and let's all get together and try to find some answers.
Become part of this tribe. We're never going to convince the world or even half the population of what we think is real. But as long as there's like-minded people and we know what the difference is, yeah,
hmm
it is what it is.
And everybody's opinion counts here. Everybody's got the right to feel the way they do. Everybody's got the right to express their thoughts. And this is a no judgment zone. Would you agree, Ike?
Absolutely.
That that we're,
Yeah. I may
you
show
can
up wearing a
totally
dress next week. And no judgment here.
that's traumatizing. But anyway, um,
What you say now?
but give us your feelings. You don't have to agree with us. You can tell us we're full of baloney, and that's fine. You have the right to have your opinion, and we will discuss it civilly here.
And like
Nobody's
I
thoughts
said,
or opinion.
if you're one of the people that watches this video on YouTube, hopefully on Spotify soon, but if you're one of those people that watches this, it doesn't comment on it or say something or give it at least a thumbs up,
Be
you're a
nice.
pussy. Yeah.
No,
You're
God.
a pussy.
Now
Pussy,
let me
scaredy cat, scaredy cat.
let me again translate for my dear friend.
Subtitles.
He's basically saying, don't be inhibited with your thoughts and share them
Pussy.
with us because we want to hear them, and don't be afraid of judgment here. That's what Ike's trying to tell you.
Don't worry about us judging you. You're worried about everybody else judging you, like your wife or the people you work for. Like, oh my God, I seen you thumbed up the Ike and Larry show. What's wrong with you? Don't worry about what your boss thinks. Come on board. Come join the Ike and Larry show. We're like a cult. Come on. Get you some. Get you some.
I told you Anton LaVey. I wish I could find a picture of him here somewhere. Look up Anton LaVey. I'm going to tell you, the beard's a little bit long, but if you get to doing the Fu Manchu thing here, I'm telling you.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you look it up. Look it up. Look it up. You'll see what I mean.
All right. I think we've beat this horse to death this time around. We'll be back
Yep.
next week again with episode number 5.
And
if you
by
guys have
5,
topic suggestions, if you guys have topic suggestions,
yeah,
attach it to this video here when it comes out.
we'll have
If
an
there's
opinion
something,
on it, whatever it is.
yeah, well, definitely I will. You know me. I may say it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You should go back underneath the house. But hey, you never know. It could be pretty good.
Yeah, please. Let's be part of the solution here. Let's all talk and come up with some answers.
You have to be a little bit thick-skinned to listen to the show. I've said it in the first episode. Don't be scared. Don't be offended when I say something that hurts your little feelings. It's nothing personal. I don't even know you. If I do know you, then I'm probably right. And what I'm saying is probably correct. Right, Larry?
I can't translate that one any better. Sorry, guys.
All right, let's call this episode 4 done for.
Share this. Get up back here and watch us next week. Share this with your friends. Get folks on here to talk. No topic.
And if you want to follow up on what we've talked about on this episode, like demons, if you have a personal demon experience or have some 2 cents you want to throw in about demons, or if your preacher said something to you about demons, hey, let us know. You can write us a
Hey,
little
Gary,
short story, and we'll read it out on
that
the
includes you
next
too,
episode.
Gary, out on the Island of Wight out there in southern England.
Rancid Channel.
Rancid Channel. Yeah,
Yeah.
check that out, guys.
Is it like Rancid Channel, like a bad smelling channel? Like when something goes rancid?
Gary, you might want to think about changing that one. I can't defend that one.
Not
Anyway.
really sure about that one.
Gary's
Okay, we'll
good.
call this episode done. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe as usual. And Larry, we'll see you next time.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.